Hey guys, what's up? Excoundrel here, and today I'm going to be talking to you about top picks from update 2.2, and we're looking specifically at the jungle this time round. Now, I'm sorry that I've been away for around 5 days. I was really ill last week, and unfortunately was bedridden until last night, and I just woke up this morning and felt pretty good, so hopefully back up to making the videos. Now, we're going to be using stats from Vain.gg, we're using professional player picks, and these picks will be aimed at solo queue. So if you're seeing Samuel get played all the time in the jungle, I think he's very good, he's definitely an honourable mention, but solo queue it can be hard to make him work. Now let's look at the 4 picks that I have suggested. Koshka, Alpha, Glaive, and CP Kestrel. So CP Koshka, CP Alpha, CP Kestrel, if you hadn't imagined. And Glaive can be weapon power, or you can build the Storm Crown Aftershock build. The weapon power build means that you're slightly less punished in the early game though, so I often prefer to go weapon power. Let's have a look at Alpha first. We'll dive straight into it. Now, I'm going to show you the pick rate and the win rate stats a little bit differently. I'm going to separate them out into each server so you can get an idea of regional differences as well. She's not particularly well played in South America and Europe, who've got a sub 40% win rate. Alpha is very user dependent, so if you're not playing Alpha well as a skilled user, you can actually really struggle with her. You've got to manage your core overload chat stacks, and you've got to know when to engage and know when you can get kills, and a lot of her kit is about surviving as well. That's what makes Alpha so good. So let's look at Alpha specifically. She's got really high mobility in the late game, especially when you get your overdriven prime directive. You're sort of dodging around all over the place. You're keeping on top of carries very easily. She's got really good mobility in the late game. She's got really high splash damage and actually decent single target damage with the aftershock. So when you get 3 stacks of your core overload and then you prime directive, that is massive damage. And obviously I don't need to speak about her ultimate. That's insane as well. And speaking of the ultimate, she's got incredible survivability. So she works very well with very few defenses. You can pick up some tier 1 defense in the early game, and that should sustain you until you've got 2 CP items, maybe upgrading it if you have a particularly powerful enemy threat. So Alpha, in summary, very mobile in the late game especially, very high survivability, and so it's very hard to kill her, especially if you're managing your ultimate and your passive correctly too. Yeah, she's really, really good in that respect. Let's have a little look at some extra bits about Alpha, because she's not all shining glory. She's very high skill cap, as you can see from the win rates across the servers. She can either be very hit or miss depending on who is using her, so you have to be very confident in your ability with Alpha. You have to be confident that you can use the tips and tricks necessary to make her work. Check out my guide for an Alpha guide if you're interested in playing her, wink wink. She's got a very weak early jungle as well, especially level 1. She sucks because you take your core charge, and to be honest, it's just not a great dueling tool at level 1. You'll get easily punished by Taka and Koshka if they know what they're doing. So you have to be very careful and very close with your captain in the early game to get you through those risky early levels. However, once you get to her aftershock, that's where she power spikes, and that's when you can start to duel effectively. That's where you can start to beat people up, and that's when Alpha starts to come online. So it's just navigating that first early 5 minutes for Alpha, and once you're past that 5 minutes, as long as you got out unscathed, she's a very, very good solo queue hero. So let's look at Glaive next. He is a far more popular hero than Alpha, and obviously has been in the rotation and the meta a lot longer, so people are a little bit more accustomed to playing him. And you can see across all servers has pretty much a double percentage pick rate over Alpha, and that could be either for jungle, roam, lane, but mainly in the jungle. That's generally where we see Glaive sit, although we have seen some roam Glaives from time to time. His win rate is around 50% as well, but don't take these win rates into huge accordance. Vain.gg only records win rates from the day previously, so while that is a lot of games and it is a good sample size, realistically we'd want to look at win rates over the course of a month or so, or ongoing win rates, and right now the only win rates that I can get are win rates from yesterday, so it just gives you a snapshot indication as to where this particular hero is at, but he's got a pretty decent win rate for a solo queue hero. So Glaive, pretty strong in most people's hands, and that's because for the most part he's fairly mechanically low intensity. The only thing that really requires a lot of skill is the use of his afterburn. Now let's look at Glaive and look at his perks, you could say, and why he is good in the jungle right now. He's got very good versatility. You can build both Weapon Power and the Stormcrown Aftershock build, which is essentially the equivalent of a Crystal Power build for Glaive, meaning that you can fit into most compositions. If you pick him early on in the draft phase, you can work him Weapon Power or work him Crystal Power, depending on what your laner goes, just to make sure that you've got a threat of each type. He's got good single target damage, especially in that both builds. They've got great single target damage, and he has got some splash damage in there as well, although it's not really what the main part of Glaive kit's about. The main part of Glaive's kit is his Afterburn. It is one of the best ganking abilities in the game, especially in the early laning phase, and to reposition a core threat in a team fight. Afterburn is unparalleled as an ability. It is a fantastic, fantastic addition to any team composition to be able to apply threat to a laner or to a carry with the Afterburn and put them in harm's way over and over again. Another useful thing about Glaive is that because of his Afterburn, he can still remain useful even if falling behind. Invest in a little bit of defense, get some cooldown reduction potentially. If you don't feel like you're going to be a damage threat, you can just become an Afterburn bot, just continuously trying to reposition their carry into harm's way. This obviously relies on your carry being decently far ahead enough to kill them, but again, you always have outs with Glaive. You don't have to completely be restricted by getting fed early like some of the other junglers do kind of rely upon doing so. However, he does rely on having some defense built into his build path. That is specifically because when you Afterburn, you commit yourself as a body to the fray. So when you Afterburn, you put yourself directly in harm's way, which means that you have to be able to survive being in harm's way in the first place, and that's where defense comes into Glaive's build path. So he's not one of these junglers that you can go absolutely YOLO and build all the offense in the world, because you will just get slaughtered, especially as the game progresses, and especially if the enemy is able to lock you down when you Afterburn. Obviously, if you build full weapon power crit, you Afterburn in, you blow up their carry in 2 hits, that's fine. But if the carry knows what they're doing, he builds defense, the captain stuns you, and then you get stuck and blown up, you can run into some issues. So he does rely on having some defense in his build. And like I talked about earlier, the use of Afterburn relies on practice and good decision making. So Afterburn should be one swift movement. Hit Afterburn, hit the carry. Hit Afterburn, hit the carry. Hit Afterburn, hit the carry. It should be, very, very quick. Unless you're looking to specifically reposition the carry somewhere that requires you to move after Afterburning. Usually it should be Afterburn behind your target, punt them towards your team. Afterburn behind your target, punt them towards your team. That's a very basic setup of the Afterburn. It relies on practicing the Afterburn in solo practice, and it relies on good decision making in team fights. So you want to be able to find the best opportunity to try and look for an Afterburn. If you Afterburn in and then they reflex block it and then you get killed, that was a bad decision. But if you wait for your team to bait out the reflex block, then you Afterburn in, reposition the carry and kill them, that was a good decision. So it requires good decision making to use Glaive properly in a team fight if you're not using him as that 100% crit blow the enemy carry up. Now let's turn our eye to Koshka, who for the most part should be played CP. I have seen some people try to play Weapon Power Koshka, didn't really go that well. Now you can see that she has a higher pick rate than Alpha, but not quite as high as Glaive, but as opposed to both Glaive and Alpha, her win rate is very high across most servers, only Europe letting down the Koshka brigade. In South America, her win rate is up at 57%, which is absolutely insane. And East Asia, probably one of the most competitive regions in the world, still sees a Koshka win rate of 55%. So she has got an incredible set of statistics behind her, based on her current position in the meta, and how she's so good in solo queue. Now, she's very good in solo queue because she's incredibly highly mobile, with lots of damage, and that makes her good in her own right. But what makes her incredibly good in solo queue is she's one of the most dominant early game junglers. She is very good, because of her mobility, because of her speed and the damage output that she has, at dueling early on and then capitalizing on those duels with the enemy jungler by stealing away their farm. A good Koshka will be completely restrictive on the enemy. She will literally drain the enemy of their jungle camps, and they will have little to no farm. So she can make her way around the map super quickly just by taking jungle camps, killing the enemy, taking jungle camps. And she's actually got a pretty decent gank when paired up with a captain that's got some form of CC like Lance or Catherine, because she could just capitalize on that, get that huge burst damage out, and burst the enemy laner very quickly. And especially post 6, she has her own form of lockdown. Yummy Catnip Frenzy, another fantastically named skill, SCMC, thank you, is very good at locking down a target, especially if they haven't thought of building a reflex block yet. And a lot of lower tier players won't understand how to fully block that ability, because the animation can be kind of janky to get hold of. So I mean, she's really, really good at most stages in the game, but she really does excel in the early to mid game, and she can snowball really heavily off that. She's really hard to lock down with the sort of the skill shot CC, you know, like core collapse or lances impale, because of her high mobility. So she can kind of get around those very easily, but she can be kind of weak to point and tap lockdown. And by point and tap lockdown, I mean things like Catherine's Merciless Pursuit, or Finn's Forced Accord, for instance. You know, these big sort of point, tap, and you'll hit something. She can be kind of weak to these types of crowd control. And the other thing about her is she's really good when she snowballs from the early lead, but if you can't snowball her early lead, she can feel kind of difficult to play from behind with. You know, if you're the one that's getting dominated in the jungle and Koshka gets, you know, really extended in terms of her first item buy, it can feel really hard to play Koshka in that situation. That's where she's not so good. So if you're playing Koshka, you have to be confident in your ability to put pressure on your enemy laner or put pressure on your enemy jungler, because that's really where she sort of excels. However, if you can master her, proper use of her cooldowns and priming of Twirly Death, and for those of you that don't know, I will talk about this in my Koshka guide, but you can tap Twirly Death to get the empowered basic attacks, and that empowered basic attack buff lasts for 10 seconds, meaning by the time you actually fight, you can jump in, get the empowered basic attacks, Twirly Death again, get the damage from Twirly Death, and use the empowered basic attacks once more. So yeah, that's what priming Twirly Death means. You can get a huge sustained damage output in team fights, especially if you're snowballing off your lead. She is just destructive. So Koshka is just ultimately one of the best early game junglers in the game right now, and it's reflected across her win rates on all servers. And finally, my fourth pick, Kestrel, and CP Kestrel specifically from the jungle, as Weapon Power Kestrel can't really be played from the jungle easily. Let's look at her win rates and pick rates first. And you might look at these figures and say, what the bloody hell are you doing, Excoundrel? You've picked one of literally the worst win rate heroes in the game to put in your top 4 in the jungle. Yeah, you'd be correct. She's pretty much 30 out of 31, with Grumpjaw being the only universally lower hero on almost every server. And that might scream to you that she's a bad pick, but that is not the case. The reason she has low win rates is because she's very, very, even more so than Alpha, user dependent. You have to be practiced with Kestrel. You have to put the time into Kestrel, especially CP, to make her work. When you finally click, when you finally find that magic way, she becomes insanely strong. Now let's look at why she's strong. She's got a really high damage output from a very long range. Glimmer shot, one kill. Even setting up active camo and baiting someone in could be considered long range, because it's a sort of a long range bait into that active camo. All of that damage output is insane from that length of range. So she can practically output almost full HP bars worth of damage from an untouchable range before the enemy can even get to her. So that makes her very strong in her own right. She's got great jungle clear speed because of the Glimmer Shot. The splash damage from Glimmer Shot means she can just get through the jungle camps incredibly quickly. She farms better than most other junglers for that case. And she's got very good secure as well. You know, the early middle treant, the Elder Treant in the middle of the map, she can secure that from the enemy without even having to go into a direct contest with the splash damage from Glimmer Shot. So, you know, she's very, very good at doing that kind of thing. And in the late game, if you can bait enemies into your active camo traps, the damage output from those active camo traps can literally one-shot the enemy carries. They will blow up. That's a part of the skill of Kestrel, is being able to do that. And now I talked about her user dependence. She's very skill and skill shot dependent. So, you know, you have to hit your Glimmer Shots. If you don't hit your Glimmer Shots, you're not doing any damage. You have to hit your one shot, one kill. It's a great executing tool. If you don't hit it, you're not doing any damage. There's no point and click ability. There's very little basic attack coming out from her with this particular build. So you have to be hitting your abilities to actually do damage. And that's where a lot of people will come a blunder. A lot of people will struggle. They will miss their Glimmer Shots and they'll say, why does CP Kestrel suck? No, you have to hit your Glimmer Shots. And baiting into active camo traps is very hard as well. One thing that is a problem for CP Kestrel, especially in the late game, is countered by good vision. So lots of scout traps, contraption, lots of flares, and if your captain or your team are struggling to clear the enemy scout traps, it can feel awful to play CP Kestrel, because she'll just get spotted when she's trying to flank. Her mobility and her ability to go untouched in active camo is one of the things that makes her so strong. So if that's not able to happen, she can feel really weak to play. However, if you can get her working, get her to the late game, she's got some of the best turret taking abilities because of Glimmer Shot. She can basically siege turrets without actually having to be in range of them. And her one-shot, one-kill is an absolute Kraken stealing machine, as well as a Kraken securing machine for your own team. I'm sure you've seen plenty of YouTube videos of one-shot, one-kill Kraken steals, so she's very good in that regard. Now, when you actually pilot her in a solo queue game, make sure you practice her beforehand, because like I said, super dependent. I do have a CP Kestrel guide as well. Haha, Illuminati, 2 heroes in my top 4. I've got guides for haha, Illuminati. But seriously, if you can make her work, she is very strong. And a lot of the pro teams are playing her CP in the jungle right now, and that's why I wanted to include her. And finally, just talk about some of the honourable mentions in terms of jungle picks for update 2.2. Honestly, there are loads that are playable. There will be people here that I haven't mentioned, things like Rona and Rhyme, who are incredibly situational, but I still function incredibly well in the jungle. But these 5 definitely, in my opinion, are less situational, but are still good. So Samuel, incredibly good still. A lot of pros playing him in the jungle right now. I do feel like he can be very hit or miss, hence why he wasn't in my top 4, but he was close to getting my top 4. Taka, obviously, really, really good against squishy backline targets. Very versatile as well with CP or weapon power. He was very close up there, but I feel like there are just people that do better jobs than Taka right now, and again, he's also quite user dependent. And I wanted to give a bit more variety than just loads of assassins. Joule, obviously you've seen how devastating weapon power Joule can be in solo queue. Obviously if you're going to build Joule, don't build her crystal power, especially in a normal game. It's very difficult to make that work. But weapon power Joule, very, very good at dealing with backline targets. So she's definitely an honourable mention. Blackfeather, because of his versatility as well. His weapon power and crystal power builds are incredibly good. So Blackfeather, definitely an honourable mention for the jungle pick. And Krul, obviously everyone loves Krul. He's really good against the likes of Adagio, really good against the likes of Ringo, very good at those targets that don't have much mobility and you want to reduce their damage output. So Krul, fantastic against those types of targets. So he's an obvious honourable mention. But there are loads of jungle picks, guys, that are still very versatile and viable on this patch. So make sure you're experimenting and trying things out the best you can. And that's the end of this video. I will be doing a captain's guide this week because it's not long till the next update. So I'll have to try and get that out ASAP so you guys can enjoy the last few days on this update before we go live with another one, which I'm not sure exactly when it is, but I believe it's moderately soon. And make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Follow my Twitter, twitter.com/Excoundrel, and follow my Twitch, twitch.tv/Excoundrel. And I will see you again soon this week, probably Wednesday, with another video. I'll be doing another guide this week. Don't worry, guys. Guides are coming. I'll be finishing off my crystal item guide at some point. Love you all. Bye.